To kettle sour or to Philly sour? That is the real question. Shakespeare didn't quite have it right. So what we have done today is we have brewed both. Without telling you which is which, we have a kettle sour, we have a Philly sour, cherry sour, by the way, and we have made both so that we know definitively which is the better sour to make. Let's get stuck into the brew day. Now, in order to actually keep this as fair a comparison as possible, the way that we ran this experiment going kettle versus Philly sour was to make a big double batch. So basically what we've done with our grain bill is made enough to make enough wort to split into two different fermenters around 22 to 24 liters in each, and then we can just go about the whole fermentation process as usual, except one of them would have been kettle soured and one of them will be souring up from Philly sour yeast. Let's talk hops. So for this style of beer, hops really aren't front and center. They're not the main character of what it's actually going to be. All they're really doing is providing enough bitterness that you can still recognize it as a beer and this tiny touch of hop character in the background. So that being said, we're only aiming for 9 IBUs. We're gonna go 6 grams of bittering hops at the start of boil, so just Northern Brewer. And then we're gonna go 15 grams of Huell melon at the end of boil, just because, you know, it's German, it's providing some vague, fresh, fruity, melon-type flavors, and I think it's just gonna play nicely with the final sour product. But as I said, there's not a lot of hops in here because it's not really a hoppy beer. For this salt profile, we basically want a pretty soft water profile. We don't need a ton of anything in particular. So what we're gonna run with is 46 parts per million of calcium, 5 parts magnesium, 15 sodium, and then a balance of 55 chloride and 55 sulfate, and 57 parts per million of bicarbonate, purely because that's what's in my tap water. But if you guys can avoid bicarbonate, don't have any in there. For this grain bill, things are actually pretty simple. It is just 53% Pilsner malt and 47% wheat malt. That's it. That's all there needs to be. And it's the same base grain ratio that we've used for all of our sours, by the way. We kind of struck a number that works, so we're sticking with it. It's a Berliner Weiss, which means we need a ton of wheat, and then Pilsner to just kind of give us a subtle nuttiness, bodiness, creaminess. But it's really about letting the sourness shine. It's not about the grains for this one. So let's get crushing. And that is grains done. The only other thing to add that I've said in many of these videos where we use a ton of wheat is you need to be using rice hulls. It's a brewer's best friend when you're using a ton of wheat or a ton of oats. I've said it in the videos before, but this just pulls apart all the grains, pushes them further apart so that when you're sparging, when you're laddering, when you're mashing, water can actually make its way through that really gluggy stuff. Let's get to mashing in, shall we? Now, this is only about 6.6 kilos of grain, so it's really not a whole lot. And there is a very important reason behind that. Berliner Weisses are an easy drinking, refreshing, oh my God, beer to be drunken in summer, traditionally in Germany. The idea behind them was that they were meant to be very thirst quenching, very refreshing, but also very low in ABV. So typically, from memory, they were only between 2.5% to like 3.9% at the very top end. So we're shooting for like basically 3.9, 3.8 for this one, because we like a little bit more booze, but the intent behind it is that it's meant to be a very low alcohol, very thirst quenching beer that you can just drink all day long without being completely obliterated. So that's what we're going for. The positive side for us is it makes it a very, very cheap beer to brew until we get to the cherries, and then it blows my budget. So in here we have 31 liters of strike water at 66 degrees Celsius, and we're just gonna mash for 1 hour. And the reason behind doing a little bit then mixing is to make sure that we just get full efficiency with all of our grains. We don't end up with little dry patches inside here called dough balls. And it just makes it easier to mix it all in instead of trying to mix concrete. All right. All right, now we're just putting our top screen on. Not necessary to use this type of stuff, but we have it, so we use it. And then we're just gonna start recirculating. So again, as we always say, if you can't recirculate on your system, really don't stress about it. It is not necessary, but We can, so we do. It just helps with our efficiency a little bit. We're gonna pop our lid on. We're gonna use our little sparge head distributor, and away we go. I'll see you in an hour. Mash is done. Now it's time to start sparging. If you are unfamiliar with the concept, basically means you're taking hot water from another vessel, in this case just the boiler over here, and we're gonna run that hot water over the top of this grain bed to wring out the sponge, so to speak. Squeeze those extra sugars out of what's in here. So imagine like when you're cleaning your car or something and you've got a sudsy sponge, all that soap in there, when you squeeze it, a bunch of suds come out. You put that same sponge into a bucket of water, squeeze it again, more suds come out. In this case, the suds is the sugar. That's all we're really doing. We're just wringing out the grains to get all the sugars out possible to make sure that we can get maximum efficiency. And this is, by the way, 31 liters of sparge water going on top of this. It's already got its salts and its phosphoric acid added. And yeah, that's pretty much it. From here, we'll start boiling. We're not gonna cut to boiling. We just remembered, this is a split batch. So half of this, after the sparge water is fully finished dripping out, we're gonna take out half, put it into its fermenter for the time being, carry on with the brew day for the other half, go through the boil process, add the hops, cool down to yeast pitching temperature, whack it into its fermenter. Then the other half that we didn't boil, we're gonna pop back into this kettle, we're gonna add our bacteria and let it sour overnight. Hence, kettle sour. We're done sparging. So we've got, what was it, 55 liters on the nose sitting in here. Haven't taken a gravity reading yet, but we are gonna chop this in half. So 27.5 liters is gonna go straight into the fermenter. I'm gonna leave that to the side, carry on the brew day with the rest of the stuff, and this one that we carry the brew day on with is going to be, don't do that. It's gonna be the Philly Sour version. All right, I'm gonna grab my refractometer and let's get a little sample. We are sitting at 1.028. Okay, that's pretty good. So then after boil, I'm gonna assume that's gonna drop to around, increase to around 1.032 kind of territory. With this thing finishing pretty dry, we're looking at about a 3.5% beer, something in that territory. So basically on target. We will come back to you in a second when we get to boiling with this one. Well, we are out of oil. So it's time to add our hops. Again, that's just 6 grams of, 6 grams? Yeah, 6 grams of Northern Brewer. So this is giving us, I think like 7 IBUs, 8 IBUs maybe? Really, really small. The total IBUs for this beer is only 9, so we're keeping it way, way low. We'll be back at the end of boil. Hops. We have our 15 grams of Huell melon hops. So that's gonna go straight in now. We have 5 minutes left in the boil. Then we are gonna go flame out. I spoke about this briefly at the start, but yeah, Huell melon, slightly fruity, Germanic, makes sense for a German beer, a Berliner Weiss. So there you go. Cut all that out. That's terrible. That sound. Well, boil is finished, so we're starting to cool this stuff down. And we're gonna have to take this again because I just realized I don't even know if I got the cooling running through. Yeah. All right, so we are cooling down. We have finished the boil, finished the brew day. We've got to get this down to, I'm gonna say around 25 degrees, and I'll be happy. Then we can pitch our Philly yeast. After that point, we can whack the rest of the batch back into here and cool it down to about 30 degrees, and then we're gonna pitch our lactobacillus, so we can start souring that thing overnight. Finished with cooling down, so we can now start transferring over into the fermenter. I'm gonna take a little gravity reading while we do so and see what we are working with for starting gravity. We are at 1.04 on the nose, bang on. So, oh damn, that's actually gonna be a bit boozier than what I was planning. So we're probably gonna end up with something in the realm of a 4.2-ish% beer, low 4%ers, but that's fine. Anyway, once that's finished transferring, we'll pitch the Philly yeast and then we'll cut back to getting the Kettle Sour going. We're down to yeast pitching temperature. Here is our 1 pack of Philly yeast. So We're gonna just let this ride. I would say the ideal would be to keep it around like 23 degrees or something, but there's no temperature control in this. So what happens, happens. I don't even have a sticker on this thing to see what temperature it is throughout fermentation. So I don't know, hope for the best. Philly yeast always smells different out of the packet every time I get one. It's so weird. Anyway, in we go. And that's all she wrote. So the next time I touch this thing is gonna be when I'm adding the cherry puree. So yeah, we'll just have to wait for that. Now, let's get on to kettle souring the other half of the batch. This is still actually quite warm. I suspect it's probably around 60 degrees-ish. So I'm gonna be as careful as I can as I tip this. Okay, you know what, I'm just gonna grab in there and go, 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 go. Nice. Done skis. Cool beans. Now, I need to get this thing down to about 30 degrees. We are gonna be using Yakult. Literally the stuff you can get from the supermarket. So it's like that, it's gut health yogurt, if it's called yogurt, it's a culture. Each one of these contains, according to the label, 6.5 billion lactobacillus cells. So what I'm thinking is I'm gonna way over pitch because normally you'd let this thing sour for like 24 hours to 36 hours. I'm not that patient and we've got things to do tomorrow. So I'm gonna pitch 4 of these and then just hope that it doesn't get too sour. But first I need to cool this down. So I'm gonna get this down to about 30 degrees with the counterflow, and then we're gonna pitch that stuff, let it sit overnight, and get back to the brew day. We're ready. So we are sitting at a pH of 5.59 for those keeping score at home. We're gonna dump this stuff in. So this is a grand total of 260 mils of Yakult. We are aiming for a pH somewhere in the ballpark of 3 to 3.7. I'd be happy with anything in the middle of that. I guess we'll find out in about 12 hours from now how close we are. So yeah, the going advice is to do 12-hour measurements and then basically start boiling it once it's hit the pH level that you like. So I'm hoping by pitching a ridiculous amount of this stuff, I can just speed up that souring process so that in 12 hours from now, I can jump straight into boiling. And that is pretty much it. I guess I will see you guys in the morning after bacteria has done its thing. By the way, I'm keeping this at 30 degrees Celsius overnight. Anywhere between 30 degrees Celsius to 35 degrees Celsius is what you want to aim for to keep that bacteria active and growing and munching away. See you tomorrow. Well, that took a little longer than expected. So we pitched those 4 Yakults, then ended up pitching another 2 this morning because by the time I woke up, this pH had only dropped down to 5.13. And I was like, oh, that's taking a while. So I pitched 2 more just for the record. Now, it is 28 hours after we did our first pitch of Yakult, and we are down to a grand total of 3.61 pH. The range for sours is 3 to 3.6, so I think we can round down and just call that 3.6. So I'm gonna start heating this thing up to boiling temperature, and then we're gonna carry on our brew day, add our hops, get it down to pitching, and get it into a fermenter. So I'll cut back when we start adding our first round of bittering hops. We are boiling, so time to add our bittering hops, which is just the 6 grams of Northern Brewer. Away they go, start your timers, and then we'll come back with 5 minutes left to add our flavor and aroma hops. 5 minutes left, in go our 15 grams of Huell Melon hops. And finally, it is time for flame out. So we are gonna start recirculating this through the counterflow chiller and get it down to yeast pitching temperature, which I am gonna go for 25 degrees Celsius, and I'll be pitching US 05. So back in a tick. And there we have it. We are now at yeast pitching temperature. So we are gonna start transferring into the fermenter, pitching our 11.5 grams of US 05 yeast, and whew, that came out quick. And then the next time you guys see us, we're gonna be blending a whole bunch of cherries to pitch our fruited sour. So I'll see you in a second. Okay, so both fermenters are now just about at final gravity. They're both sitting around 1.01. I suspect they might drop a few more gravity points by the end, so it's time to whack in some cherries. And we've got a couple of different varieties we're gonna use here. Yes, obviously fresh cherries would be the ideal, but they are outrageously expensive and require quite a lot of work to de-stem and pit them all, and I don't really feel like doing that with, you know, about, what, 8 kilos of the stuff. So I'm taking the easier route. What I'm gonna do is use a bunch of these canned cherries. I've got one jar here that I just have, so I may as well use it. It's not my favorite cherry flavor. It's more for like Black Forest cake, but it's gonna get drowned out by all the rest anyway. And then we've got a bag, 2 bags of frozen cherries. So I'm gonna blend all of this up. We're gonna chop it in half. Half will go into one fermenter and half will go into the other. So I've got a fair bit of work to do with this little itty bitty bullet blender. But time to get cracking, I suppose. Let's get into it. Well, that was some very messy, very sticky work, but we now have about 3.95 kilos in each of these tubs to throw into each fermenter. But just before we do that, I want to find out what the gravity of this cherry puree is, because that's going to help us figure out how much potential alcohol we may be adding or detracting from the beers that we've made. So, I wonder if this is going to give me a real reading. Oh yeah, oh wow, that's quite high. So that's 1.07, or is that an 8 or a 9? I'm gonna go 7.8, 1.078. I'll put a link in the video down below about how you can calculate fruit additions and how much extra alcohol that's gonna give you. But the basic principle is you need to know how much additional sugar you're adding to the fermenter, what the current reading was in that fermenter, and then what the final gravity is, blah, blah, blah. That's basically gonna tell you how much booze you're adding by adding fruit puree. So, I can do another quick video about that later if you guys want. Let me know down in the comments. Let's get this stuff into the fermenters now. You might be wondering why I've got a tube sticking in here where the airlock should be. Reason for that is really simple. I've connected this to the CO2 tank. I've got the CO2 tank pumping in at a rate of about 2 PSI, so that as I open this, oh, I made it difficult for myself to open it now. As I open this and add this fruit puree, I'm gonna have a bit of CO2 providing a blanket in here to just prevent the chance of oxidizing the beer with, you know, being open to the environment. So it's just a little way of safeguarding and protecting all your hard work. Let's dump all of this stuff in and try not to miss. Nice. Nicely done. All right, there we go. One down, one to go. And I've also got heat belts on these fermenters because it's starting to get a little bit colder in Australia now, so temperature was falling a little lower than optimal fermentation temp, so that's, you know, that's why I've got that. Now I can take out the tube. Come on. And pop the airlock back on. That's my best way of doing a 0 oxygen dry hop with the fruit without you know, an actual unit for the plastic buckets. Anyway, on to the next one, and then we should be wrapping up and getting ready to show you guys what these final results look like. Okay, we're not tasting yet. This is actually only a couple of hours after I've added the cherries, and here's a word to the wise. Make sure you have plenty of headspace before you use cherries, because this stuff just absolutely exploded out the top of the airlock, and I've now made a very janky blow-off tube just because I know that it's going to keep happening overnight. So I'm really happy that I caught this before it became before it became an astronomically massive mess for me to clean up in the morning. But yeah, there's a lot of sugar in those cherries, so lots of headroom and blow-off tube. Don't use an airlock. Not worth it. And there we have it, our final results. So on this side here, we've got our Philly Sour. Over to the right, your left, we have the Kettle Sour. They both taste absolutely unreal. They're both extremely pretty, and they've got this amazing like pink head. It's almost like pink creaming soda, pink frosting kind of thing, icing maybe on a birthday cake. Very, very pretty beers. But I'm so sorry, I actually can't tell you which one is the better beer because we're doing the YouTubey stuff. So you guys are gonna have to stick around until next week to watch our Brew Talk video where we go through and taste both of them side by side to decide which is actually the best sour. So I can tell you it's good, but I can't tell you which is best. I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for sticking around.